right, good morning, everybody. I have that it's 10 o'clock, so I want to welcome everybody to our NCRAN first webinar of 2020. My name is Chelsea Byers from University of Illinois, and I am our host for today. And before I introduce our speaker, I would like to mention that next month in February, we are having two webinars. The first webinar is going to be on February 7th. Elder abuse, what you need to know, and the second one will be on February 21st, elder abuse and federal resources. And just to let anybody who is new to NCRAN know, or just to give you guys an update, that going into 2020, we were going to be doing probably typically one webinar each month, and they will typically be held on the first Friday of the month. Of course, we moved this one because last week was so close to the holiday, but next month we will be hosting two, and they will be hosted by the Department of Justice from Washington, D.C. So hopefully you guys can tune in next month. Again, those are on February 7th and February 21st. So this month we have Diane Reinhold. She is a nutrition and wellness educator from University of Illinois, and I am so happy to have her as our guest speaker this month. So I am going to turn it over to Diane. Thanks, Diane, for being our speaker for this month.
All right, thank you, Chelsea. I'm very excited to be here, and we're talking about a topic near and dear to my heart. Before coming to work with Extension, I worked as a clinical dietitian in both the acute care setting and the long-term care setting, and I just really have a heart for aging adults. So today's presentation is understanding the aging process, how aging affects your nutritional status. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about why nutrition is important as we age and some of the changes that are going to occur and how those changes are going to impact an individual's nutritional status. So as we age, a common issues that come to play are dehydration, difficulty in chewing and swallowing. We have chronic health conditions. We may have weight loss or weight gain and cognitive decline. So first, let's talk about why nutrition is important. And I want to put all of these up on the screen. Okay, aging is linked to a variety of changes that occur within your body, including muscle loss, mild cognitive decline, and a decrease in the sense of taste and smell. These changes can make it much more difficult for older adults to meet their nutritional needs. Consequently, poor nutrition increases older adults' risk of malnutrition, of falls and fractures, as well as a decline in the quality of their life. With that being said, it's very important that as we age, that we have good nutrition in the forefront of our minds. Your food choices that you make each and every day are going to impact how you feel today, tomorrow, and in the future. And when you have good nutrition combined with physical activity, your diet can help you reach and maintain a healthy weight and reduce your risk of the development or the progression of chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and essentially it's going to promote your overall health. So keeping your mind sharp, maintaining your lean muscle mass, and just being able to enjoy your family and friends is incredibly important at any stage of life, but especially as we age. While healthy eating is essential at all stages of life, eating well is especially important for older adults because aging is linked to a variety of changes. Some I've mentioned already, but it also includes nutrient deficiencies, decrease in quality of life, and poor health outcomes. And as long-term care providers, we want to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to reduce the risk of poor health outcomes. Thus, we need to make healthy eating a high priority priority, not only as we age, but also as our clientele age. So wise food choices and a balanced diet are really the key elements for a healthy lifestyle, and they can both slow down and improve the aging process. So I'm a firm believer in helping people understand the why behind the ask or the why behind the recommendation. I believe that if people understand the why, they're going to be much more likely to adapt and move towards the behavior change that's being recommended. So my first question is, how many people know that there are different stages of adulthood? There are different stages of adulthood, and it's important to understand that within each stage, there are going to be different physical changes that are going to occur, perhaps more rapidly than in other stages. And our bodies are going to be changing, and those changes are going to make it much more difficult to get and meet our nutritional needs. So we're going to be talking about those today. So you might be thinking, well, why do I need to know that there are different stages of adulthood? Well, if you are working with someone who is 65, they may not necessarily have some of the issues or conditions that someone who is simply 72 has. So we have to remember that as we age, aging is linked to a variety of changes in the body, as I've mentioned earlier. And these changes can make it much more difficult for older adults to meet their nutritional needs. Therefore, understanding where a person is in the aging process is going to help you better meet the needs of your patients or those clientele that you're working with. Aging is linked to, again, muscle loss, the thinning of the skin, decreased acid production in the stomach, and these changes can make it much more difficult for individuals to meet their nutritional needs, and they can actually contribute to nutritional deficiencies. Once individuals have a nutrient deficiency, that can cause a spiral or cascade of other health-related problems. So in addition to the fact that there are different stages of adulthood, we also have to understand that there are many factors that influence the aging process. So aging is not going to be the same for everyone. Aging is going to be different based on your genetics. So you may have an individual who is chronologically 60 years of age, but you would never guess they were over 52. Or you conversely may have someone that is 65, but they seem more like they are in their early 70s. So genetics play a huge factor, but also our lifestyle, the environment that we are a part of. If we're smoking, if we're out in the sun a lot, if we're consuming or participating in substance use or abuse issues, all of those things contribute to how an individual ages. In addition to the environment, whether we have a lot of sun exposure, which is going to cause premature aging of the skin, our lifestyle, as I mentioned, if you're going to engage in maybe you have a stressful day at work and you're going to consume some type of alcohol or some other type of substance to help deal with your stress that you're dealing with. That can have a negative impact because it's going to increase the oxidative stress at a cellular level that is going on within your body. Additionally, there's a psychological component. And so if you are aging or just going through life and you have a lot of stress, but you don't have a good social support system, that can contribute to your accelerated aging process. So genetics, the environment that we live in, our lifestyle, the behaviors we choose each and every day, and our psychological status, our outlook on life, the individuals that come around and support us and encourage us. All of these play factors and influence the aging process. So today, though, we are here to learn about our nutritional status. So there are factors that influence our nutritional needs. The total number of calories a person needs each day is going to vary depending upon your height, your body composition, your age, your gender, the level of physical activity that you engage in, and any type of stress, whether it's a physical stress or an emotional stress. So yes, emotional stress actually does play a part in our nutritional needs. However, generally when we think of stress level, we think of things like if there's an infection, if there is a wound, if you have a broken bone of some type. And the interesting thing about as we age is the fact that as we age, we have reduced calorie needs. This is generally because we're going to be losing our lean muscle mass. We're not going to have as much muscle. We're not going to be as mobile. And so we don't necessarily need as many calories. However, there's a nutritional dilemma because older adults actually need to get just as much, if not more, of some of the key nutrients while eating fewer calories. So you can see the problem that can cause. All right, so again, our calorie needs are gonna differ, and these are some general recommendations based for adults over the age of, or 50 years of age and older. And our goal as we age is to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And we know that in order to achieve this goal, we have to have good nutrition and we need to stay active. Um, our calorie needs are going to be, again, dependent upon those things that I mentioned earlier. But it's also very important that we're staying active. As we're learning more about science, we understand that physical activity is even more important than we ever dreamt. And so if you're not very physically active, women, you're going to need about 1,600 calories. Men, 2,000 calories. The more active you are, the more calories you are able to have. So if you think, okay, so not physically active, well, another word for that is sedentary. And sedentary means a lifestyle that includes only light physical activity, generally associated with your typical day in, day out activities of living. Going to the grocery store, things like that. Moderate activity is going to be activity in which your heart rate's going to be slightly elevated, but you're still going to be able to walk and talk without any difficulty. If you're very active, like the intensity, generally you're going to have an increase in heart rate, increase in body temperature, but you're not going to be able to carry on a conversation while you're doing a task. And so intensity has to do with the degree in which your baseline physical activity level is. So what happens as you age? It's actually much more than the passing of time. It's a subtle and quiet process that occurs each and every day, and it often goes unnoticed. Those first strands of gray hair are a sign of the inevitable, and that's okay because we're getting older and our bodies are changing. And it's important for us to embrace that. I had a participant in one of my classes, and she was struggling with being physically active, and she just didn't have the strength and endurance, and she was in pain to perhaps go for a walk to the end of the block. And so I suggested using a walker. And she said, I don't want to use a walker because that's what old people do? And I looked at her, and she was well into her 70s. And I said, well, you may not know this, but you're an older adult. And she looked at me and said, what? She's like, I don't want to be an older adult. And I said, you either need to embrace it, or you're going to be very unhappy as you continue through the aging process. And so she said that she would take that into consideration. So she was quite a joy. But as we're adapting to our new realities, we shouldn't discount every symptom that is evidence of the aging process. So some of the things that you may not necessarily know or think about, and I think it's really important. Again, I worked in long-term care for many years, and sometimes I thought, well, perhaps if some of the support staff, the CNAs, if they had a better understanding, they would be less frustrated by their residents. So an individual's ability to engage in physical activity for a prolonged period of time can decrease with age. And that has to do in part with the fact that our heart rate becomes slower. And over time, the natural pacemaker within our heart is going to lose some of its cells. And some of its electric pathways can get damaged. So these changes can result in a slower heart rate and can cause us to have a susceptibility to some issues like having abnormal heart rates like AFib. Our heart can become enlarged if we have, especially if we have congestive heart failure. If individuals are snoring or have some form of sleep apnea, that contributes to the enlarging of the heart. Our blood vessels and arteries become less flexible. They become harder. And because of that, that can contribute to high blood pressure and other cardiovascular problems because it's causing our heart to have to work much harder. All right, our bones and our joints. Believe it or not, you may not know this. Maybe you do. It's pretty awesome if you do. But bone is a living tissue. And as we age, the structure of bone changes. And this will result in our loss of bone tissue. And because of that loss of bone tissue, that means our bones are going to become weaker. And when our bones become weaker, that is going to put us at increased risk for breaks and falls. And again, you can have a break simply by bumping into something. And all of the changes that are occurring within our bone minerals are going to be in part to the aging process, the hormonal changes that are going on. In women, menopause triggers the loss of minerals in our bone tissue. And in men, a gradual decline in sex hormones leads to the later development of osteoporosis. So again, these are things that are going to affect us. Generally, they don't necessarily affect us until later in life. However, they can affect individuals based off of your genetics, environmental factors, your lifestyle. And so you may notice some of these changes occurring earlier than what you had anticipated. Bone loses calcium and other minerals. And in addition to having changes in our bones, we also have changes to our joints. Right? Who knew that was a thing? Joints become stiffened, and because they become stiffened, they're going to be less flexible. We have the thinning of the cartilage that will occur. We can have a decrease in the fluid that's inside our joints, and our ligaments can shorten and loosen, and that can contribute to other more serious problems. Another condition that occurs as we age is the fact that we have changes in body composition. From the time that you're born to the time that you turn about 30, your muscles are going to grow larger and stronger. But at some point in your 30s, you start to lose muscle mass and muscle function to some degree. The cause So it's important too, as we age, that we're working to maintain a healthy body weight. And as we're aging, those changes in body composition, you may notice that as we're losing body muscle, fat tissue is building up around our midsection, and it's also occurring around our organs. And the layer of fat that's under our skin is going to get smaller. Now, this isn't going to be for someone who's necessarily in their 30s and 40s. It does begin to occur at that point in your life, but we're talking as you get even older. So again, beyond 50. So as that fat tissue is being replaced with our lean muscle mass, weight loss later in life is going to occur because that fat replaces lean tissue and fat weighs less than muscle. So my mom was excited because she's like, oh, well, I've lost all this weight. But then I looked at her and I was like, she does not have the strength and the muscle that she once did. And again, for me, it was very obvious to see the change from having a much more muscular frame to a much more adipose or fatty type of body composition. And inactivity is really the primary reason that we can have a change in body composition. However, there are other biochemical reasons. Again, we just don't make the muscle and utilize it as well as we did when we were younger. But you know, you lose as much as 3 to 5% of muscle per decade after the age of 30, and we're just not as active as we once were. The other day when I was walking into the Y, I saw this toddler just running, and I thought, man, if I were that size and I could run that fast and then get up over the curb and do all the things that this little guy was doing, I was like, oh, I'd just be like thin like him. So it really does make a difference how much we're moving. And so when we have these changes in body composition, it contributes to our decrease in flexibility. It decreases our coordination, and it also causes us to have difficulty with balance. And that's why as we age, we say it's so incredibly important to make sure that we're maintaining as much lean muscle mass as we can. So why do we have changes, and why do we lose muscle as we age? A decrease in our body's ability to synthesize protein, so our decrease in our body's ability to make protein, a decrease in hormone production, especially our growth hormones, and of course there's age-related reduction in nerve cell response. It sends signals from our brain to the muscle to initiate movement. All of these factors come together to contribute to our muscle loss. And again, that muscle loss is often replaced with some form of fatty tissue. And fatty tissue burns fewer calories. So then we can say, oh, we have a decrease in our metabolic rate. And of course, a lot of times we have inadequate intakes of calories and protein to sustain our muscle mass. As we age, a lot of times individuals have difficulty chewing and swallowing, so they may not necessarily be getting red meat, fish, chicken, red meats, and other forms of protein in because of the difficulty with chewing, or the fact that they just aren't eating a well-rounded meal. All right, so it's important to understand that any loss of muscle mass has consequences, because loss of muscle means loss of strength and mobility. Muscle loses size and strength as we get older, which contributes to fatigue, weakness, and reduced tolerance to exercise. So when we used to hop out of bed, get in the shower, get dressed, hop in the car, go grocery shopping, run errands, come back, and by noon, and you just keep on with your day. Well, as we age, because we have that decrease in muscle, we have that decrease in strength and that loss of mobility, simply, getting up, getting showered, eating breakfast, putting your dishes away, things like that, by 10 o'clock, you might be ready for a nap because you just don't have that endurance, because you don't necessarily have that strength. And raising your arm up to put your shirt on, if you have like a regular like t-shirt versus a blouse. And that's one of the things that you'll often notice, that as individuals age, instead of having to put their arms up and over, they find it much more easier to put on blouses with a button in the front, so that they're not having to use the muscle to go up and over. So that range of motion is going to be lost, in addition to the loss of strength and mobility. All right, aging affects many body systems, and I could talk for literally hours about this, but I only have like a short time span, so I have to go faster in order to cover everything. But first thing we're going to talk about is our digestive system. So overall, your digestive system slows down as we age. Remember, your digestive system moves food through your body by a series of muscle contractions, just like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. These contractions push food along through your digestive tract. And as we age, this process sometimes slows down, and it can cause food to move very slowly through the colon. When things slow down, more water gets absorbed from the food, and then that can contribute to constipation. Interesting, right? And if you think about it, and kind of thinking back to the muscle loss, if individuals are losing muscles, they're not just losing muscle in their big muscles, they're losing the muscles that help with those contractions to get the food through the digestive system. It helps, those muscles help with the breathing muscles, with the swallowing muscles. So there's huge implications for that loss of muscle mass as we age, and it affects all of our different body systems. So constipation is an issue. And then diverticulitis. About half the people over the age of 60 have diverticulosis. This occurs when small pouches in the lining of the colon will bulge out if there's a weak spot in the intestinal wall. So consuming a high fiber diet is really important, making sure that you're getting adequate nutrition. But again, diverticulosis is generally something that just simply occurs because of the aging process. However, if you have a lifestyle where you're not consuming a diet rich in fiber, that can make it accelerate, and you may see that issue present itself earlier than what it typically would. Additionally, there are also going to be some issues because your digestive tract, especially your small intestines, you're going to see changes. They're not going to be dramatic, but they're going to impact your body's ability to absorb certain minerals and vitamins such as vitamin D, calcium, and vitamin B12. And both vitamin D and calcium are incredibly important for our skeletal system. Another issue that we notice problems with as we age is our bladder and our urinary tract. Due to loss of muscle control and different neurological issues, remember, our nerves don't necessarily get to the brain like they should. We're losing muscle. That can cause urinary incontinence. And if your bladder muscles contract, if the sphincter surrounding the urethra relaxes, it's going to let urine pass through without you intending for it to, so you can have leaks. Additional issues are if you have an enlarged prostate. So obviously this just affects males, but that can contribute to difficulty in urination. So if you're dealing with issues of incontinence or difficulty urinating or frequency of urination, Individuals may think, okay, well, I'm not going to drink as much, and then they become at risk for being dehydrated. And that in and of itself is a whole nother issue, and we're going to talk briefly about that later in today's presentation. The other issue that affects both our digestive system and our bladder and urinary tract is the issue of obesity. Obesity is associated with an increased abdominal pressure, and that can actually worsen incontinence. So losing 7 to 10% of your current body weight can help alleviate some of those issues. All right, so again, each and every body system is going to be affected by aging. And vision. Vision can be affected and is often affected. And everyone says like, oh, once you get in your 40s, you know, you might end up having to get bifocals, and that's true for the majority of people. But you could also become more sensitive to light, and your eyes can have a much greater difficulty adapting to the level of light. And so you might think, okay, so it's not that big of a deal, but keep in mind, we eat with our eyes a lot of times, right? So if you see something and it looks just delicious, you know, the vibrant colors on a plated salad, the strawberries, the roasted pecans, the blueberries, the oranges, all on your beautiful bed of lettuce with some feta cheese, and you can't see the vibrant colors, it may not be as appealing to you as your younger self may have found it. Also hearing. Hearing can impact our quality of life. If we have decreased hearing, we may not necessarily want to engage in social interactions. And then again, that's part of the environmental, psychological kind of components that if you're not necessarily engaged, you may not necessarily be as interested in eating or the social component of eating. Additionally, there are going to be issues with your mouth and your teeth and your gums. So your gums, by far the biggest threat to healthy teeth is gum disease. And so if you have problems with your gums, that can contribute to tooth loss. So if you have pockets within your gum line that can attract bacteria, and that bacteria can grow, and that can cause, again, the deterioration of your teeth. Also, the simple wear and tear of your teeth. When you're 76, your teeth aren't going to be as magnificent as they were when you were 21. You could have broken teeth. You could have chipped teeth. You could have teeth that are missing. You can also struggle with issues of dry mouth. If you have dry mouth, that will increase the risk of tooth decay and other gum problems. And also, our taste buds. We actually have a decreased number of taste buds as we age. And so if you just don't necessarily have the same feeling from eating, because feeling or eating isn't just about nourishing our body. There's so many more factors that contribute to why we eat, how we eat, what we eat, how much we eat, all of those different factors. So we may not necessarily think that, oh, well, Betty doesn't have her glasses on, so that's okay. She doesn't really see that good anyway. She can just go ahead and eat dinner. If you put her glasses on, she may eat so much better than if she isn't. If you're taking a resident down to the dining center and they don't have their hearing aids in, they may be very disinterested. Maybe the person serving their food would have to ask numerous times, like, what would you like, green beans or peas? And because they're embarrassed, because they're frustrated, you know, simply putting their hearing aids in can help them to have a much more enjoyable experience, and they'll be much more likely to meet their nutritional needs. There's also a decrease in taste and smell, and that can lessen your interest in food and your enjoyment in eating. Smell and taste play a huge role in the enjoyment of food. The ability to taste and smell food are important for not only our appetite, but also for making sure we're getting adequate nutrition. And again, we have fewer taste buds than our younger counterparts, but our sense of smell also diminishes as we age. So again, if maybe you don't have a good sense of smell, but everything else is going, you can again counter that by making sure all of these different components are in play to help your loved one or resident get the nutrition they need. So another component of aging is aging affects our skin. The effects of aging on skin is much more than simply wrinkles, age spots, and the growth of skin tags and the like, right? Below the skin surface, we're going to be losing that thin layer of fat, like within our cheeks, temples, chin, nose, and around our mouth. And that's going to loosen our skin, and that's going to give our face a much leaner look to it. If you lose, in addition to having that loss of fat, you can also lose bone around your mouth and chin. Remember, our body isn't breaking down and rebuilding the bone as well as it once did. And if you have that, the skin around your mouth can pucker. And you may, even your nose may change. You could lose some cartilage. And with that, gravity is taking its toll. And when the skin becomes less elastic, gravity can make your eyebrows and your eyelids droop. That can cause problems. So sometimes if it's really bad, you can have surgery to have that lifted. Again, if it's drooping really bad, that can contribute to a loss in vision. Also, as your skin changes, you can have a fullness in your cheeks and jaw, and that can create like your double chin and your jowls, and it can also lengthen your earlobes. Isn't that crazy? I just find that aging is like so amazing because you see all these things happen in those that lived before you, and you think, well, maybe that won't happen, or maybe it won't be as bad. But then lo and behold, you notice, hey, my skin's dry. Why is my skin dry? Oh, the body isn't necessarily producing the natural oils that it once did. Oh, hey, you know, my skin's getting a little saggy, or I'm having a few extra lesions or growths develop, and, you know, what's that all about? And, you know, it really is the natural process of aging. All right, so I'm going to have to talk faster, it looks like. So our brain and nervous system, of course, we know there's lots of changes that go on there, but as people age, nerves may conduct impulses much more slowly, resulting in decreased sensation, slower reflexes, and often being clumsy, all right? So couple that being clumsy with the fact that we have decreased muscle strength, decreased coordination, that can contribute to a whole lot of problems, putting us at increased risks for falls. The nerve conduction can be slow because the myelin sheaths that surround our nerves, it breaks down. And that then contributes to a lot of other issues. We can also have abnormal changes that occur within our brain because of the plaque that forms and the tangles that form within our neurological system. There's also a fatty brown pigment that can build up on our nerve tissues, and that can cause a whole host of other problems. We can also have issues where our spinal cord or our spinal column is compressing. So our bones, our vertebrae are placing pressure on nerves, and that can contribute to decreased sensation, decreased strength. It can contribute to balance-related issues as well. All right, so there are a lot of issues that can occur. Our brains are going to be shrinking in part because of the aging process, especially our frontal cortex and our hippocampus. And those are important for learning, memory, planning, and other complex mental activities. So individuals may seem like it takes them longer to do things. They take longer to think through things. And again, that's all normal. That's all to be expected. So when older individuals say, hey, you talk too fast, you need to slow down. Well, it's not because they're being rude or something. It's because really, truly, the nerve conduction is slower. And so their thought processes may be slower. And of course, these are all generalizations. Not every single individual is going to be affected by all of these different aging processes, but majority of individuals will be affected to some degree by these aging processes. There's going to be a modest decline in our ability to learn things and remember things as we get older. That's normal, that's natural. And given us sufficient time, most of the time, individuals and patients are going to be able to come up with the answer to the questions that they're being questioned about. Of course, depending upon any other additional chronic illness that they're dealing with. So factors influencing our brain health, our previous lifestyle, our overall health status. If you have peripheral vascular disease where blood flow has been impeded and you're not getting good blood flow to your extremities, that is also going to impact your brain health. If your brain isn't getting enough blood flow to provide it with the oxygen and nutrients that it needs. Also environmental factors and genetic factors. All right, so I've told you a lot of stuff, right? And you're thinking, okay, great. So what does all this mean? Well, I'm hoping that you've been being able to kind of put some of the pieces together. But my big thing is that age really does matter. It doesn't matter if you're in your 40s or 50s, if you're in your 60s, 70s. Age matters. It doesn't matter at what level you are chronologically. Age truly does matter. So nutritional needs for older adults. I mentioned earlier that most adults need fewer calories than they did when they were younger, but they need more nutrients, key nutrients. And that's because our body's ability to properly utilize those nutrients, they might have the inability to absorb some of the nutrients, or they're simply just not utilizing them efficiently. The older adults often have less muscle mass. They have a decreased metabolic rate. They often may be struggling with chronic diseases, and they may be making poor food choices. Not necessarily because that's what they want. Maybe it's because they have a fixed income, they have a limited budget, and they're not going to be able to go grocery shopping and purchase the things that they once did when they were younger. Maybe they've gone from a one-person household, or excuse me, from a two-person household to a one-person household. So there can be a lot of problems that contribute to that. So in addition to the physical changes that we've been talking about, there's also social factors that impact the nutritional status of individuals. Maybe they have difficulty chewing and swallowing. And we're going to talk about that in a few more slides. Maybe they have mouth pain or tooth loss. There's often changes in taste. There are several medications that impact our ability to taste. And if food doesn't taste good anymore, why would you eat it? There's also a decreased sense of taste and smell, as I mentioned earlier. There could be physical problems. Maybe they don't have the strength or endurance to prepare their own foods. Maybe they need assistance with self-care. So maybe they need help getting up and going to the restroom. And because that's kind of embarrassing, or they feel embarrassed, or because you know, they don't want to bother somebody, then they may say, well, I'm just not going to eat that much, or I'm not going to drink as much. And again, that contributes to additional problems. Also, there can be a loss of appetite. Now, appetite and hunger are different. Hunger is your need to eat. If you're hungry, you need to eat food because your body's telling you to do so. However, as we age, those signals may not get to your brain to say, hey, your body's hungry. So you could have a loss of hunger, but you could also have a loss of appetite. And appetite is a desire to eat. Appetite occurs as a coordinated effort between your brain and your digestive system. And so if you look at a delicious salad or even a caramel cinnamon roll, that looks delicious, right? Your mouth may not water like it once did. And so loss of appetite could be contributed to a psychosocial issue. It could be loss of smell. It could be due to a medication. It could be due to depression. There's a whole host of reasons that your appetite could be diminished. So what can you do? It's about prevention. It's about staying physically active, talking with your healthcare provider, healthy eating, stress management. All of these different things are going to be helpful in addressing issues that are common to aging. So I'm going to very quickly touch on dehydration, difficulty chewing and swallowing, skin and chronic health conditions, weight loss, and decline in cognition. And again, very briefly. So water, staying hydrated is incredibly important. It's important to stay hydrated as we age since our body consists mostly of water. It can range anywhere from 60 to 72% depending upon who you're talking to and what articles you're reading. But water has many different functions within our body. It helps regulate our body temperature. It helps in the digestion and breakdown of our food. It participates in the metabolic reactions that are going on within our body. I'm always fascinated by individuals who go on a low carbohydrate diet. And a high protein diet, and they don't change the amount of fluids that they're drinking because really they're allowing their body to become dehydrated because it takes much more water to metabolize and break down protein compared to that of carbohydrate. Water also helps with the removal of waste from our body, and it helps to lubricate and cushion our joints. There's fluid found within our eyes, our spinal cord, and it plays many, many different roles within our body. And I'm still waiting for the big one, regulates body temperature. A lot of times I hear older adults, oh, I'm so cold, I'm cold, I'm cold. And I always wonder why someone hasn't done a study yet, and maybe I'm throwing it out there into the universe that someone will do a study. Like, if individuals are well hydrated, are they less likely to complain of temperature intolerance, especially with regards to older adults? Additionally, there are factors that are going to influence our need for water. There's a myth out there that says, hey, everyone needs to drink 8 glasses of water a day. And that may not necessarily be true. So our body composition influences our need for water, our activity level, our environmental factor, whether we are in a humid area or in an area that's dry. All of these things influence it. Also, diet, because we consume a lot of our, not a lot, 20%. We can get 20% of our average water intake from the food that we eat because there is water that naturally occurs within those items. Thirst influences our water intake, and that's in response to changes sensed by the mouth, the brain, and the nerves. However, aging, medications, and various chronic illnesses can impede that ability to recognize our need for fluids. Therefore, as we age, it's very important that we're just intentional about making sure that we are consuming adequate fluid. Now, I always love this because I get to bring out my P chart. Yay! But how much should you be drinking? Really, a rough indicator of hydration status is the color of your urine. If your urine is a dark amber color, or if it has a really strong odor, you may not be drinking enough water. Of course, there's going to be considerations like if you eat asparagus, that's going to impact the color and the smell of your urine. Different medications may also affect it. But as a rule of thumb, passing urine that is colorless or pale yellow at least 4 times a day means that you're going to be getting enough water. So after going to the bathroom, make sure you take a peek in the toilet and see what color your urine is, because you really don't want to end up becoming dehydrated. Um, Dehydration is really having a negative fluid balance, meaning you're not getting enough to drink. And a modest dehydration can contribute to 2% loss of your body mass, so the weight of your body. And that isn't necessarily a good thing, because when you are dehydrated, you can have issues with muscle weakness, you can be irritable or sleepy, you can have a dry mouth, a dry tongue, and then that will impact your ability to want and to consume various types of foods. You can have issues with cramping in your legs and your arms. So it's very important that individuals, regardless of their age, are staying well hydrated. The other issue we're going to address today is chewing and swallowing. Normal aging is associated with the shrinking of the brain, as we mentioned earlier, and the diminishing of nerve function, and the decline in muscles that are used for swallowing, right? It all comes together. And this can then cause us to have difficulty swallowing or dysphagia, and that can contribute to not getting enough or adequate amounts of food or water. There are over 30 muscles involved in the swallowing process. It's a very complex process. So if you have any neurological issues, perhaps you've had a stroke, you have Parkinson's, or some other type of issue, that can contribute to having chewing and swallowing problems, but also aging can affect that. So make sure dentures are fitting properly. If individuals have dentures, make sure that if you are having food get stuck, that you're drinking, well, actually, if you have food getting stuck, you need to go and speak with your healthcare provider, have an evaluation done. But there are a lot of different things you can do. Making sure you take a drink of water after each bite, having sauces or salsas with your food to moisten it. You can also mechanically alter foods or cut them up into bite-sized pieces or puree them. So often I would have families be very upset when their loved one would have to go on a mechanically altered diet. However, I would try to explain to them, because they would say, oh, I don't want my grandma eating baby food. But I would explain to them that by pureeing their food or grinding their food up, it's going to be much more easier for them to chew and swallow. Sometimes as we age, chewing and eating a meal could take 45 minutes and they fall asleep in the middle of their meals. And so it's important that we give them the properly produced foods so that they get the nutrition they need with decreased effort on their part, so they don't become tired, and also that if they need to have thickened liquids, that we make sure that they're getting those thickened liquids. Thin liquid is very hard to control, and so thickened liquids are a great way to stay well hydrated and make sure that they are safely swallowing. All right, aging, nutrition, and the skin. So we already talked about the skin in another slide, but I just want to reiterate that again, our skin is different as we age than it was when we were in our 20s and 30s and even 40s. And we have to make sure that we are not allowing friction to occur. So friction is the resistance of motion, and it can occur when skin is dragged across a surface, such as if you are sitting on the edge of your bed and you scooch to the if you're sitting on your bed and you scooch to the end, that can cause friction and that can contribute to skin tears. And because our thin is skinner, you can have a skin tear occur. And if you have that repeatedly, you can end up with a lot of issues. So it's important to make sure that your skin is going to be, that your skin is dry, that you're not allowing it to be moist. So your bowel and bladder issues, if you have incontinence, can cause a lot of problems because that moisture contributes to the breakdown of skin. It also invites bacteria. And another thing that people may not realize is that stool is very acidic. So if someone soils themselves, you need to make sure that they're being cleaned right away because that acid is going to break down the skin. And then keep in mind the fact that their skin is already compromised simply because of the aging process. All right, moving on to chronic health conditions. Aging is a major risk factor for diseases such as cancer, heart disease, and many other neurological diseases. And depending upon that particular type of chronic health condition, that can cause individuals to utilize their nutrients differently. There can be an increased loss of nutrients, especially if you have wounds, if your wounds are seeping, if you have individuals that have issues with vomiting, diarrhea, or even nausea. If you have nausea, more likely than not, you're not going to want to eat because you're feeling so nauseated. If individuals have difficulty breathing, if they're oxygen dependent, if they have, so if you have COPD, that's a chronic illness where often in the later stages of life, you become oxygen dependent, or if you have dry mouth, if there's changes in cognition, if you have confusion and agitation, it makes getting your nutrients very, very difficult. And again, depending upon the type of illness, you may have, and you often do have, very different nutritional needs that need to be addressed. Oh, and increased wandering. So I worked on a locked dementia unit, and I was amazed at how busy some of our residents were. And they were very fit, had really good muscle, but they were on the move. And they often had issues with weight loss because it was difficult to get them to consume food. And so we often would give them like liquid nutritional supplements in little cups, just small amounts, 2 ounces, 3 ounces throughout the day to help them meet their nutritional needs. Now, weight loss and aging. When I worked in long-term care, I would be so frustrated because some of the staff would say like, oh, well, Betty needed to lose weight, so it's okay that she's lost 10 pounds in the past month. And I'd be like, what? No, she can't. Because weight loss in the elderly is not the same as it is when you're a younger adult. So even if you have weight loss in your 60s and 70s, it's not going to be the same type of weight loss that you have in your 30s, your 40s, and even your 50s to some degree. Often they're losing lean muscle mass. When you are losing that lean muscle mass, it's going to cause a decrease in mobility, a decrease in functionality. It's going to put them at increased risk for falls. And a lot of times weight changes could be based on fluid changes, such as edema. Again, our heart isn't working as well. We may have other issues going on. And so it's very important to document the level of edema. Edema is at +1, +2, +3, because if you have +3 edema and then their diuretics are changed and then the individual has a 10-pound weight loss, I'll be okay with that. As a registered dietitian, I'm okay with that because we can document the difference in the changes within that edema level. If it's not documented, then we're playing by a whole nother set of rules, and I have to figure out, okay, so why did they really lose weight? Are they not eating? And then you have to look at your state auditors that are going to come in and say like, okay, we have a weight loss. Is this due to neglect and malnutrition? Or is it due to something else? And then you have to prove that. But if you have all the documentation up front, you're going to be good. All right. So cognitive changes occur as we age, and apraxia is the inability to perform physical actions despite having intact physical capability. With apraxia, people may not know what to do with utensils or how to chew and swallow foods once it's in their mouth. And so when I worked in long-term care, sometimes you would have to give cues. You'd be sitting at a table, the resident would pick up their fork, and you would have to say, okay, well, go ahead and, put food on your fork. Okay, put it in your mouth, chew it, swallow it, and you have to give them one direction, one-step directions. We also have agnosia. It's the inability to interpret your sensory functions. And so you may not recognize or feel hungry. You may not recognize that you're thirsty. And so you have to be directed and guided so that you can address those issues with your residents. Also, there can be a decrease in self-awareness and self-regulation. So again, they don't necessarily recognize that they're hungry or thirsty, or that they need to use the restroom. They could engage in unsafe behaviors like eating food without cooking it. They could have socially inappropriate behaviors. Another example, when I worked on the lock dementia unit, some of our residents, in order to allow them to have more independence, we would, or not me, but the staff would put them in their chair and then kind of put like a little table across their chair, and they would be able to eat their food independently. Now, the behavior that went on, very normal, very acceptable within that setting. But what sometimes our residents would do, they would dump their plates upside down and then they would play with their food. But as they're playing with their food, they're also eating it. And so that allows them autonomy. It allows them the independence to feed themselves. It allows them to do that on their own time frame. But sometimes, depending upon the staff would say, I don't have time to clean up this mess and wait, for them to get done eating. I'm going to go ahead and just feed them. But then that can cause agitation. It can cause decreased food intake because they're frustrated because they want to be independent. So keep in mind that with those cognitive changes, socially inappropriate behaviors may seem socially inappropriate outside the context of a long-term care setting or a setting in which individuals are going to be allowed to have that individual autonomy. All right, so let's review if I covered everything. I think I did, and oh, look, I'm a minute over. So why is nutrition important? We talked about changes that impact our nutritional status. We talked about common issues that impact our nutrition status, dehydration, difficulty chewing and swallowing, weight loss, cognitive decline. Ooh, all right, anyone have questions? Chelsea, I'm going to let you chime in if anyone has typed a question in the chat box.
One question was about copies of the slides. I mentioned that the webinar was recorded and it will be posted on our NCRAN page, so they could check it out there. Also, I did post that if people would please take a quick moment to fill out the Qualtrics survey. It really only has like 3 questions, so it's a quick survey. We do appreciate everybody's feedback, as your responses do help us guide future webinars, and we can give feedback about the current webinar to the speakers. So There were no other questions, so I will open it up for questions. If anybody has a question for Diane, feel free to type it in your chat box. Diane, this was a fabulous webinar. This was so much good information.